Welcome back. So if you've been watching my channel recently, you've probably seen me upload quite a few videos around my favorite system and my camera system of choice, which is the Leica M system. There's a lot of intricacies in there, and that's kind of what I've been talking about recently and just giving these broad overviews of the camera. Not getting into any real detail, of course, but just giving kind of a basic understanding for those who might not be familiar with it. And in two of my recent videos, I covered the M6 and the M7, which are the two cameras that I've owned. You can watch them by clicking either of these links if you haven't seen them yet, as a little bit of a primer. But because the cameras are so closely related, I wanted to get into the details of the differences between them. And if perhaps you're in the market for a more modern Leica M film camera, I wanted to go over what two of these models might look like for someone who's shopping. So let's take a closer look. All right, so here are the two cameras. And as you can see by looking at them, they're pretty similar. A few differences right off the bat that you might notice is the shutter speed dial. So this is the M6 Classic over here, and the M6 Classic was released in 1987 and was discontinued in the late 90s, I believe 1998, where it was replaced by the M6 TTL. The M6 TTL, of course, is slightly newer, and it has TTL metering through the flash, which the M6 Classic does not. The M6 Classic just has a standard hot shoe and then a PC socket on the back. And so that means the M6 Classic retains the smaller and a little more finicky, I'd say, shutter speed dial. The M7 is the more modern version, which you can see right here. It's a little bit easier to use. When you have your finger on the front of the camera, you can rotate it just like this. You don't have to reach inside and kind of around the shutter speed, shutter release, which is right here. It's much easier to manage just from the front. Though, of course, it does have the auto exposure mode. And that gets me into really the primary difference between the M6 and the M7. That being that the M7 right here, this guy has an electronic shutter. Every other Leica M camera, or at least every other Leica film camera, has a mechanical shutter system, meaning that you can fire it at any shutter speed for any length of time without a battery. This does need a battery to function and give you the full breadth of its abilities. Now, going back to the shutter speed dial, if you look closely up here, you'll see that two shutter speeds, which is the 1/25th and the 1/60th of a second, have this white line between them. That's because those two are mechanical shutter speeds. So even if your battery does die when you're out in the field, you can still fire the camera and it's not just going to be a brick for you. Both the M6 and the M7 do take the same LR44 battery. It's a very standard battery. You can still pick it up today, relatively cheap as well. They both came with relatively similar viewfinders as well. Both my models are the 0.72 magnification, which is really the standard magnification if you're looking at one of these cameras. It's really the best for 35mm work. There's the 0.85, which is really good for 50mm work. And then the 0.58, which is good for 28mm or those with glasses. At least that's from what I've heard. There are a few design aesthetics that you can tell right off the bat as well. Number one, top plate's a little bit different. The M7 is just a hair taller, and you can really see that. If you look at the viewfinder here, you'll notice that the M7 has these two silver bars, one down below, one up top, whereas the M6 only has one. And so that's where you'll best see some of the height difference. You can also look at the little red Leica dot. That is the same size Leica dot on both cameras, but as you can see on the M7, it's got a little bit more space on the top there. The Film Advance, once again, basically the same piece of equipment. Actually, what I'm going to do here, let me take off these lenses really quick so we can get a closer look at these in comparison. So if we look at them one on top of the other, you can see same Film Advance. The M7, of course, does have an on-off switch, which if on the off mode, let me just make sure it is, will lock the shutter. M6 does not have that. M6 shutter is always primed as long as the shutter is cocked, but with the M7, you can disable it. M7 also went to some of Leica's more modern styling. So if we can get in really close here, you'll see that the M7 has a little bit newer font styling in the Film Advance. I know this is really getting into the weeds here. And then also the hot shoe has the silver markings, which again is a more up-to-date Leica styling. And there you can see the TTL connections for TTL flash. They both have the same 45-degree angle film rewind, But if you'll notice, and this might be because of wear and tear, but we can kind of catch it in the light right here, that the M7, despite both being black chrome, the M7 is a slightly different finish. It's slightly more satin. And again, that might just be because of wear and tear. If we go to the back, you'll pick up a few more differences. You'll see that the branding for the Leica M6 and Leica M7 is really in the same spot on the back there. But when we look at the film ISO selectors, we see some big differences. Now, of course, the M6 this is only impacting the light meter. So wherever you set it at, that's just going to tell the camera how to read the film. Whereas with the M7, if we get this closer up here, you can see that you have, you have a lock on one side here. And if we can just move this around, this is kind of the default setup where you have it as DX coded. So it's going to automatically read the film with sensors that are placed inside the camera body. Leica M6 doesn't have that. And then with the X-coding, you do have the ability to do exposure compensation. So you can, set it to +1, +2, whatever you want to do, depending on lighting situations, or if you're just pushing the film, but you still want to just use the DX coding. So there's a lot of automation that went into the M7 that isn't really in any other Leica film camera. And that might be why the M7 is still produced today. You can still buy these brand new. They'll run you about $5,000, which is pretty ridiculous. Another one of those small design changes, you have just the M7 branding up here, which is similar to their M8, M9. And then the lens release right here, you'll see that there's no indentation on it. All the other Leica cameras, if we pull the M6 back up, all the other cameras have this little recessed portion, and it's supposed to be filled in with red paint, but the red paint comes off pretty easily. So it may have just been a notion of, hey, it's rubbing off anyway, why are we bothering with this? We'll get rid of it. As the kind of standard Leica entry camera, this is really often the first Leica that many people will buy, just because it does have that light meter. What can you expect for pricing? To get a Leica M6, I mean, mine's got some, there's some paint loss there. I dropped it in New York a little while ago. There's some finish loss around here. So it's in good condition, I'd say. If I were to sell this, I would probably ask between $1,200 and $1,300. And I'd like to think that that's fair. If you spend about $1,000 even on one of these, you'll be getting a good deal. And if you spend about $1,600, you'll be at the top of the price range. But that'll really be for like the M6 TTL, one of the newer models, one that's in very good condition, one that's recently been CLA'd. Mine just got back from a complete overhaul at the Leica factory. So that's why mine's a little bit on the pricier side. They did a whole bunch of stuff. They cleaned out the whole camera. They replaced the light meter, reworked the shutter mechanism, and a whole bunch of stuff. Leica M7 kind of picks up where the Leica M6 tapers off in terms of price. Low end, you'll expect to spend about $1,600. High end, $2,200 if depending on where it's coming from. I paid a little bit more for mine because it did come directly from Leica as part of like their certified used program, and I was happy to get that. They did such a great job with my M6 and reworking it that I was totally fine with paying a little extra money. You can see that it still has like the plastic cover on the base here. Both cameras can use all Leica accessories, well, not all, but modern Leica accessories. So grips are the same between the two systems, and the Leica M7 does have a few additional grip options and motor drives. So the motor drive for the M7 and actually the Leica bit, which is the trigger advance, you can still get today directly from Leica. They'll cost you a pretty penny, but you can do it. One thing to note, and it's a common complaint, because these both do have the dual stage film advance here, where you can see that it pivots like that. I don't mind it, but I know a lot of people prefer the single piece film advance that you can find on the M2, M3, and then the MPs, and some of the special edition Leicas. The M7 uses a different film advance mechanism. So if I have the M6 here and I get myself a single piece film advance, I can easily swap it out. It's just unscrewing this piece around the shutter release here, popping it off and putting the new one on. That's all there is to it. But with the M7, because it has the on-off switch, and there's more linked into this shutter mechanism, it's a more complicated camera overall, you can't just swap it out. This is really the only film advance you can get for this camera, to my understanding. One last thing, both cameras run the risk of having a flare in the viewfinder. So if you're in a sunny day and you catch the light just right, the rangefinder window or the rangefinder patch within your viewfinder window will wash out and it'll be really hard to focus. And so what that means is that you're constantly having to like worry about, oh, okay, do I cover it a little bit? If I put my finger here just right, maybe it'll get it all nice and visible and I can actually focus the camera. Both cameras can be upgraded to the MP Finder. If you're searching for a camera and you see that it's been upgraded to that finder, definitely something to go for because it does make a world of difference. On the M7, camera models made after the first few years included that by default. So it's only the early model M7s that will have the rangefinder problem or the rangefinder patch problem, whereas the M6 throughout the entire camera lineup will have that as a potential issue, just something to look out for. That's the M6 and the M7, and you can see them right there side by side. Once again, it's my favorite camera system, the one I use the most. You can see they're just about identical in almost every way except for that shutter mechanism. Really a great camera system though. Cannot recommend it enough. But the important thing to remember, as with all Leica cameras, is that it's what suits you. I understand that rangefinders are for everybody. I understand that Leicas aren't for everybody. And while the Leica lenses are good, you know, really, I haven't seen a whole bunch of difference between a comparable like Nikon or Canon lens. It's the quality's still there, so don't worry about it. If you're sweating about what kind of kidney do I have to sell in order to be able to afford one of these, if you can't, it's image quality wise, there's plenty of great stuff out there that you don't need to worry about it. All right, well, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that. If you have any further questions, maybe some more specific Q&A type stuff that you want to know about these cameras, leave a comment below and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on social media. I've included links to all of my social media accounts in the description below. So thank you for watching and until next time.